Hey everyone, back with another Warlock Sanctum interview. Today we have Stephanie. Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Bryant. I am a page GM and game designer from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Very nice. So, Stephanie, how long have you been doing the paid GMing for?
I started just about a year ago. I think honestly it was like November, so really, just about a year. Um, and I started because I was I was working on a game, actually an adventure for Burn Bright, which is a role playing game published by Roll20. And I decided that I really wanted to have some cool art for it. And rather than try to do a Kickstarter before I have art, which is a good way to have a failed Kickstarter, uh, you need something. You need something to show people. Um, and my game design bank account was just a little bit light for hiring good art. I was like, okay, I will do paid GMing for a little bit and raise some money to afford cool art. And so I did. And it was good because I had a justification to myself for why I was asking for money for something that I often do for free out of the love of the game and my friends. And so that kind of put me in that perspective of like, no, listen, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this to pay someone else. And that helped me break into the mindset of, no, this is something I can get paid for.
All right. It's an interesting origin story.
Yeah,
As a storyteller, what would you say your two biggest strengths are?
I would say that one of my big strengths is that as a storyteller, I understand the value of a good secret and a good mystery. So people really like to solve mysteries, even if they're not like mystery buffs and they don't, subscribe to the traditional mystery structure. If you think about it, a dungeon is a secret, right? It's, even in your biggest dungeon crawl, you are trying to solve a puzzle. You're trying to understand this strange place. And so I like to provide secrets and mysteries to my players. And when I'm a player, I like to give secrets and mysteries into my backstory so that those can be explored and they can come out in play. Uh, Even people who are, you know, like they don't even want the dungeon crawl. They want to have a very, you know, role playing intensive experience. Even those people want to reveal secrets and find out secrets. And so for me, the quintessential question is, who has a secret? What will they do to protect it? And that is very essential to everything that I write and also everything that I run.
That is really interesting. So it took me a sec to kind of process all that. I'm like, yeah, no, that is right at the essence of a good adventure.
Now
Um,
you did ask me what were my two things, so
yeah,
that was the first one. That is probably the number one thing, and the other thing, of course, is that I'm really good at improv. I Most of the time I don't do a lot of prep for games. I will pull together NPCs on the fly. I will pull together locations on the fly. I have a bunch of random generators if I need them. I don't usually need them. And I'm really, really good at asking, oh, yeah, what does that do to the players? So I'm really good at pushing the world building back to the players and then they become more invested in it. So I enjoy that part.
fair, fair. Um, Other than Threadbare, what's your two favorite systems? Because that's where I know you from.
Yeah. So Threadbare is my game that I wrote. That's Powered by the Apocalypse. So I do really enjoy Powered by the Apocalypse games. My current kind of bread and butter paid GMing is Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which does an amazing job of portraying messy emotional relationships, uh, which is great, you know. But aside from Powered by the Apocalypse, I'd have to say that Gumshoe is way up there for games that systems that I really enjoy. My current the current thing that I'm chewing on, and by chewing on I mean I'm running a campaign for my weekly group, is Swords of the Serpentine, which is a gumshoe system. Gumshoes by Pelgrane Press, and
Hmm.
not surprisingly, it is all about mystery solving. So it's all about pursuing a mystery and coming up to a solution. Um, Swords of the Serpentine is Gumshoe set in a high fantasy swords and sorcery setting. So I guess technically it's low fantasy. Anyway, it's a fantasy setting, um, and it's great. The setting is brilliant. I love it, and it's written by some of my favorite designers. So it's just a good overall thing. And the other system, which oddly enough is also a Pelgrane Press, and I understand when you ask me to pick like one or two, that's really hard because I love so many different systems. I mean, I love Fate. Obviously, I love Powered by the Apocalypse. Actually, currently, I'm working on a game that's based on the Burn Bright dice system. Even though
Oh,
it's not a Burn Bright game, but it uses that dice mechanic.
okay.
Um, so I love that. It does cool, interesting things. I love Chubo's marvelous wish granting engine and everything that does, which is kind of this similar engine to Nobilis, if you're familiar with that. But the other one that I really jam with is called Drama System, and it's also by Pelgrane. And Drama System, so not surprisingly, Gumshoe, all about mysteries, right?
Hmm.
Drama System is all about interpersonal conflict and drama. Um, it's basically if you wanted to play a CW TV series, you would play like Drama System would fit really well. I know people would say, "Oh, well, Cortex is kind of written for that," but like Drama System
Yeah.
is just it's really written for it. Um, because everything that has to do with things that are not the messy emotional relationships um, is kind of not really built out. You don't really worry too much about that because what the game is about and what the mechanics reward is interpersonal conflict where you want something the other person does not want to give it to you. And when I say want something, it's got to be like an emotional stake, right?
Hmm.
And the other person has a very good reason they do not want to give it to you. But if they give it to you, they get rewarded. And so there's sort of this interplay, this little constant, well, my character does not want to give you that, but if I give in, I will get something in return that mechanically that I can use later. Maybe it's worth, revealing the secret or giving you the respect that you think you deserve or, giving in on the thing that you want. So it goes back and forth. Um, and it's a wonderful system for that. It's very lightweight. It doesn't have dice. It has cards, but the cards are used largely in the non-messy emotional part, which they call procedural scenes or procedural conflicts. I actually, when I run it, I kind of leave that part aside because it I don't think it works as well to build the story that you want to have. And so when I run Drama System, I will focus much more on the messy emotional relationships. And then the procedural stuff, I'm kind of like, yeah, let's just yes or no, and we'll just, and so I like that side of things, you can almost import just about any other um resolution mechanic to to the procedural side, and it'll work. Because the procedural side and the relationship sides don't really interact too much. So there's, it's not like when you are successful in a procedural thing, you gain for the for the emotional thing. They're separate enough that you can sort of replace one of those systems, and I sometimes do, but drama system's fantastic when you're playing it when you're playing it with people who really e buy into the premise, which is that we're gonna play people who, uh, they have these messy emotions. This is not a team, right? These are not people that get along. This is like the dysfunctional family, I ran a game that's, one of the play sets is set in the 1920s, and they're all, they're all bootleggers, right? This is one from the book. The drama system is like kind of the setting. The book that really describes it is called Hillfolk, and Hillfolk has a number of like settings for it. And we played the bootleggers one at one point, and they were all related to each other, and they were just an absolute disaster of a family, like the mom is in love with the uncle, and the father had gone to jail, and the son is, he's the only one who has any virtues whatsoever. It's just I mean, it was fantastic, and I think they ended up like sending each other to jail. One of them, uh like the really really awful villainous one, um, got off scot free because just sometimes Walter White, succeeds. It was just it was so. But yeah, it's that kind of just lots of and understand that this drama played out in just 3 sessions. I like to run small arcs. So I will run 3 sessions of a game plus the session 0 for character creation and content and setting and everything else. But I will do a 3 session arc because for me that's the sweet spot. You have some rising action, you have something in the middle that can get nice and messy, and then you've got the big conclusion, which I like to end on a cliffhanger. It's always
Mhm.
good. You know, we're on season 4, campaign 4
Yeah.
of a Thirsty Sword Lesbians campaign in my, paid GMing campaign. Um and we're on season 4 in large part because the players really resonate with their characters. Their characters are in just ongoing series of messy queer relationships, and every season ends with some kind of cliffhanger to give them a reason to want to see what happens to their character next. Like how do I what like what's gonna happen to this person, and so and I feel like a 3-story arc. It also, in paid GMing, I like to do a defined arc like that also because somebody can join my game, and if they're not super excited after the second session, they've got 1 session left in the campaign. Now they can drop in the middle, that's fine, but most people will stick it out to at least the campaign end, and then it gives them a little point where they could say, "Oh, do I want to get off this this ride, or am I enjoying it enough to stay?" You know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it gives a nice little cadence. I take a break. It gives me a chance to replenish my creative uh, mind and everything. And yeah, so God, that was a really long answer to what are your favorite systems.
Yeah.
But
It's great though. You answered like 2 other questions in there, like how long should you run an
great,
arc? Like,
great.
how do you use different systems? Tying back to your first question, but continuing on because I will just listen to this for hours, and this is supposed to be a short interview.
Sure.
um, how do you make use of virtual tabletops, if at all? Like, I know you use a
So
lot of. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So I worked at Roll20 until the end of December of last year.
Oh,
I'm actually wearing my Roll20 staff shirt today, just because I still have it. Um, So, obviously, to be fair, I was a Kickstarter backer. I am account number 314 on Roll20.
Wow.
Um, yes. I have been a Roll20 user since the day I got my beta invite, and working there was one of the best experiences professionally for me. I loved working there. It's a great place to work. But obviously I'm incredibly loyal to them. And so um when I play games that other people are running, and this like, oh, we're going to use, Albo Radio, or we're going to use Foundry, or we're going to use this, and I'm like, I have no idea how to use those. Please assume that I am completely inept, even though in all other regards, technically, I'm actually fairly skilled. But I get into those and I'm like, I don't understand why you would use this instead of Roll20. Because I'm so used to, and I'm, I consider myself to be very much a power user on Roll20, and I have a lot of resources and everything that I can reach out to if I'm really stuck. Not backdoor resources, by the way. I have to file a help ticket just like everybody else now that I no longer work there. But it's still nice to I know where those resources are. For example, I know how to write a ticket. I know, how to request that help. So yeah.
Very cool. That's interesting. Didn't expect that answer with you running so many light-based systems. Usually people are like, who needs a virtual tabletop? But interesting.
It is true. You don't necessarily need a virtual tabletop for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, for example, but the character sheet in Roll20 is really good.
Hmm.
And the way that I use virtual tabletop for these light systems, because you did kind of ask that, like what you didn't
Yeah.
really ask which one, but you asked how.
Yeah.
Um, so I will. So Thirsty Sword Lesbians, the campaign in Roll20 comes with a number of sort of worksheets that are made into what you would call a map, but they're actually called pages in Roll20.
Hmm.
So when you're doing session 0, you drag everybody over to the page that shows, your palette and your lines and your veils, and everybody gets to write on the screen what they care about, what they don't want to have, and things like that. Um, and so during the world building phase, you've got a lot of these kind of landing pages, right? Well, beyond that, what I will often do is I will just set up a page that has a picture that is evocative of a place that we are going to. So, for example, we go into the forest. We established during session 0, the forest is really important to this group. So, I will find like a landscape picture that has a beautiful fantasy forest, and I'll make that the backdrop. I turn off the grid. I don't need the grid. We're not moving
Hmm.
tactically or anything like that. They don't even have tokens for the characters most of the time, but I will put that out there so that they have sort of a visual evocative thing. Um, and then the character sheet itself has all of the macros built in. So when I ask somebody, okay, I need you to roll for this move, or I need you to roll for, plus wit or something like that, they can just click a little button and it'll prompt them if they need to be prompted for something, like they need to select which skill they're using, uh, and then it'll roll the dice for them. And that's perfect in my mind, because that to me, in in many games, how you interact with the character sheet really is an expression of that's the expression of the mechanics.
Hmm.
So giving them that sort of, yes, here's your character sheet, here's what you can and can't do. Although, can't do, you're right. There's always something you can do with it. Um, it gives them that opportunity to just sort of figure out like where, like what do they want to do and what can they do. So yeah, yeah. Right now I'm doing something a little different, which is I have taken a system agnostic pre-written dungeon adventure. It's not really a dungeon, it's a setting. And I have imported it into my Thirsty Sword Lesbians game. I talked to the players about this before we did it, and it has like 5 or 6 dungeons in it, like
Mm-hmm.
mapped out and everything. Um, the setting is capes and cowls, no, capes and cloaks and cowls and a park, which is it's a nice little fun little setting. By I've got the book here. Frank Redding, Katie Wicklin, and Diogo Nogueira. And it's this neat, weird setting where it's a theme park, like an amusement park that a wizard built inside an extra dimensional space inside his cloak, and then he there was like a a pogrom basically of tailors and sewists and seamstresses and such. So all of these people who work in clothing and fashion and style and textiles, especially like magical ones, all your
Mm-hmm.
magical cloaks, right? They all found refuge inside his extra dimensional space inside his cloak. And so
Okay.
and then he disappeared. And so it's been
Oh.
starting to unravel, and like so things are getting corrupted in there. Um this setting resonates with my Thirsty Sword Lesbian group like nothing else. I mean, every so often I'll show them a picture and they're like, "Oh, oh, that's what this person looks like. Yeah, no, I'm totally hitting on them." You know, or like I was converting the things over, and I came across a picture and I was just like, I, I'm sorry guys, I have to show you this. It's the cloak of binding, which looks like a bondage tool, honestly. I'm just like, they clearly whoever wrote this like expected a bunch of you know uh, you know weird kinksters to go through it. But it's, I mean, I don't want to make it sound as family unfriendly as it sounds, because you can definitely run it in a lighter, less racy way,
Yeah.
but I can't with this particular group of players.
Well, with the game you're running,
The game I'm running, it lends itself to this. So it's a good mashup, but it is unusual because usually, especially in Powered by the Apocalypse, you're like, draw maps, leave blanks, right? Is one of the principles in Powered by the Apocalypse, and this particular setting, it has fewer blanks than I'm used to. Usually, I expect a blank page,
mhm.
but here we have an actual mapped out dungeon and things like that. So it's kind of different, and we'll see how well it goes. I mean, we had our first session last week with it, and they were like, at the end of it, they were like, we got into a fight, we had combat. We almost never have we like combat is usually the thing that happens at the very end of the campaign, in the big, culmination with the
Mhm.
big bad. I was like, yeah, I know, it's kind of exciting, right? And they're like, yeah, but it's weird. So um we tend to be a lot more on the thirsty side in Thirsty Sword Lesbians rather than the sword side, let's put it that way.
Hey,
um
whatever the troop has fun with.
yeah, and they absolutely do. And so every NPC in thankfully every NPC in this module is, I mean, there's a few like non-thinking monsters and things, but most of the NPCs are beings that you can talk to and reason with and flirt with and bargain with and so forth. And so they've already made a pact with a fey creature. So that's great, like that hasn't this is campaign 4, and I think in every single one of the campaigns so far, somebody has made a bargain that they regretted. So I'm really looking
Perfect.
forward to that. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely perfect.
yeah. Messy
So,
storytelling, I'm telling you.
absolutely. So continuing on, so you're also a designer. So what is it like to how does that interact with you as a paid GM? Like you've designed some of your own games. I've played in a game that you designed yourself with you, and it was fantastic because I had no idea how to even approach that game before then. Um,
So, great question. So as a there's a certain part of me that says when I run Threadbare as a paid game, I like to give a discount because honestly, it's an advertisement for my game, right? So when I run it, I I will run it at a lower rate, and if I'm running like the demo version, I'll usually run that one for free. I have a couple of demo versions that are like less than an hour. They play in a very short amount of time.
oh, very
Um,
cool.
yeah, I actually have one that I can run it in 15 minutes if I'm at a convention. I hand out
That's
the
kind of neat.
pre-gens. Yeah, it's great. The premise of that one is that they're in what's called the Toynado. So it's some sort of fast moving vortex, and they have to we take 5 minutes while they decide what the tornado is, if it can be talked to and things like that.
Hmm.
And then they have to figure out how to land safely, how to get out of it. And once they do, it's over. So it's a very quick, 15 minutes of sort of interacting and trying stuff. And yeah. Yeah, it can go really quick. It can also drag on to up to like half an hour, but it doesn't usually go past that. It's a nice short one.
There. Do you have, speaking with a couple other designers, I don't know if I had them on the interview show, but do you ever have the temptation to like create your own custom bits for the mechanics and put them in there when it's not your game, or
Oh yeah, all the time.
good, good.
I do that. I do that all the time. I mean, I haven't so much in Thirsty Sword Lesbians because the the game doesn't need it most of the
Oh,
time.
okay.
Most of the time, the game flourishes in a space of messy emotional queer relationships, and if you play in that space, you
Hmm.
don't really need extra stuff. Now I will say that I very much want to do something like that. I have When I read Thirsty Sword Lesbians the first time, the first thing I said was I want to write the rules for how do I date my sword, because because it's thirsty
Sold.
sword lesbian. Yeah, right. It's thirsty sword lesbians, and we don't do much with the swords. Like they exist, but they don't have a whole lot of mechanical stuff to them. And so I'm starting to toy with that and starting to play with that. And I know there are people who have put out like playbooks where you are the sword and things like that. I think that's totally reasonable. But I kind of there's something there for giving the sword an NPC personality that can be flirted with and dated, and and like I could date your sword. That would be different and interesting and like really uncomfortable for you and me, especially if you and I have like history or conflict as well, you know. Um, so yeah, and is it a secret that we're dating, like that me and your sword are dating? Like that's exciting, right? So there could be all sorts of things like that. Um, I will say as a GM, one of the challenges as a GM is when you have a lot of NPCs to manage, and so if that would be the one thing that I would worry about is like, okay, if somebody's dating their sword, I have to role play their sword. If I have 6 players dating their swords, I have to role play 6 swords. That's a
Well,
lot,
unless
you
you
know.
assign that role to the person sitting beside them.
True, that's definitely a possibility. Uh, th- and I'm totally gonna steal that. Coming to a playtest near you soon. Um, no, but I mean that's certainly one of the options is
Mm.
make it a like a secondary PC, and uh, but then but then it's like if I'm dating your sword and I'm playing your sword, then we get messy too. So
Well, messy can be fun with the right group.
it
Uh,
absolutely can. For sure, absolutely, yes. But yeah, as a game designer, as a GM, just as in general, I don't think I know too many GMs who who have more than about 2 years of experience. I think the first year or two when you're GMing, you kind of stick to the safe rules, and I think you should. I think it's good. It's kind of like when you're a writer, you don't break the rules of grammar until you have mastered them, right? E. E. Cummings is not a good model for new writers, but he's great if you've been writing for 30 years, you know. Um, so it's similar kind of thing where, you know, the first bit of learning how to GM is a good time to stick to what's been published and work through that, and, you know, start branching out when you understand the system that you're running really well, and then you're like, oh, I'm running into this place where, you know, design wise, I'm running into this space where either there's what we call the fruitful void, which I'll talk about in a second, or, you know, it's something that's deliberately left out, or it's just something where this mechanic just, I don't understand how it's supposed to work with this. And when I say I don't understand, I mean I understand what they did. I don't think it works, you know. And I've had that happen. I've had that happen even with Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I've got one playbook. I'm not going to name it. I have one playbook where I I will let people run play it at my table, but I will be very upfront. Like, I don't understand mechanically how this one's supposed to work, and I'm not sure that it was play tested well to because I think there's flaws, right?
Hmm.
Which is fine. Like that. I mean, I do the same thing when I'm, you know, developing a game. There will always be things that you realize later, or someone else realizes that just don't work the way you thought they were going to, or it's entirely possible, like, I'm just missing it in this particular playbook, but which is fine. Um,
It's a
but
matter
anyway,
of point of view, really. Like
it
different
can be,
mindsets.
absolutely. Yeah, and for sure in this particular case, there's obviously something in this particular playbook that people resonate with because I've had multiple people choose it
Okay.
to play it, and I'm like, okay, well, you're obviously choosing this for a reason, and I'm going to try to figure out what that reason is. In Threadbare, um, each of the playbooks in the GM section, each of the playbooks has a description of what the player is probably telling you when they pick that thing, right? So if somebody picks the uh, rock, I think it's called Rock Solid. Um, there's a playbook that only has one damageable or one part that can't be damaged, right? And so it's kind of like if you ever played with like the Briar horses, right? The Briar horses, they're just a solid piece of plastic, right? So you know, right? um, and um, and so it's based on that, right? Well,
Hmm.
what I tell in the book, I say, you know, if somebody picks this, they are probably looking. Like they don't want to be super vulnerable. Like they don't want to be vulnerable to physical, you know, uh, attack essentially,
Hmm.
which is fine. Like Fredbear has no combat, so you know, but you will often get people who come into Threadbare from other games and they think, "Oh, what are my hit points?" You know, and
Mm.
if they find out, "Oh, I'm invulnerable," they're like, "Oh, great. Okay, I'll take that because I'm invulnerable." It's like, "Cool." That person does not want to be physically vulnerable. And cool, that's great. They're telling you out of the gate, like that's something that's important to them, and you as a GM can support them in that. You can say, okay, that's the thing that they want. That means that what the other things that they want to do, you know, need to lean more on either like emotional vulnerability, or, you know, give them opportunities to be heroic because they're invulnerable. You know, they get to be Superman in a way, you know, because they can't be hurt, right? Stuff like that. Um, so I deliberately wrote out in Threadbare, like, what are your players telling you when they pick a playbook? Now there is an exception to that, which is that uh, everybody has a favorite childhood toy, and people will pick a playbook based on, this sounds like my childhood toy,
Hmm.
and they will play that even though that's not what they like, that does not mechanically lead into the kind of game that they or story that they want to tell. But that's fine, because these are all flexible enough that even if you're like I'm playing the Briar horse, and it's physically invulnerable, but I actually really want to be vulnerable. Cool, no problem. I got you. we will find ways to make you vulnerable. We just, it's that's cool. You can still do those things. It's just kind of like what are you rewarded for in playing that playbook? And in Powered by the Apocalypse, that is a kind of an essential question
Mm-hmm.
with every playbook that you design. What are you rewarding in in playing this particular playbook? Because every playbook in Powered by the Apocalypse is kind of a mini game,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and they feed into different types of things. A lot of them have like a separate track of resource of some kind, that sort of moves them back and forth on their particular path. And so I like to understand those playbooks pretty well. I want to go back to talking about the fruitful void.
That's
You said you've got
fair.
time.
I,
You said you've got time. I got
that's
time.
fair. That's fair. Like I would listen
Uh,
to design talk all day, but
So so the fruitful void, I just dropped that and then I left it. And I said I'll come back to it. I want to come back to it. The fruitful void is a concept in game design, and I think Jason Peter is the person that who. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Jason. Peter. Um, Jason is a game designer from Canada. He's a fantastic designer and one of the most helpful people I have ever met as a new designer. Like he's very open and very supportive of other game designers. And I'm pretty sure that he's the one that where I encountered the term the fruitful void. Fruitful void is essentially as you're working on something, you're designing things and you leave space. Deliberately leave space in your game for people, GMs, to add something. You leave it's like draw maps leave spaces, right? You leave space for the people who are playing and running your game to contribute to it as an idea and so forth. And the fruitful void might be in the setting, right? So that's draw maps, leave spaces, right? That's here we have this uh pocket dimension inside a cloak, and there's multiple little islands that each one has its own thing. And in one of the islands they describe a tower, but they don't map it out, right? It's just sort of described. So if your group decides to go into it, you have a lot of space to work with, right? The drawing of the cloak and the patches and everything, there's one gap that like a hole in the cloak, right? Was there an island there? I don't know. Could there be a lost island? Yeah. So that's a great example of a setting that has a fruitful void. Design wise, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I mentioned that there isn't a whole lot about the sword itself, right? That's a beautiful, fruitful void for someone to come in and say, "Okay, what could I do with that?" I could encourage my players to want to make their sword somehow, upgradable, right?
mm-hmm.
And then I've got a place where this is a space where I can be like, okay, if you upgrade your sword in some way, you find a new sword, you level up as a character and something happens to your sword as a result of that. It could be something like that where it's like, okay, your leveled up skill or new move is tied intimately to your new weapon or something like that. You could do things with that. There's a fruitful void that was left there, and I don't think it was an accident. I don't think that they spent all this time making Thirsty Sword Lesbians and then decided not to do anything with the swords. I think they probably tried stuff and then they just said, "You know what? We're just going to leave that." I don't know. I haven't asked them, but that's my guess is that at a certain point you say, no, that's a lot of systems. We'll just leave it and let people decide for themselves what they want from that. And that's exciting as a GM, as a paid GM, even as a designer. It's always exciting when people leave enough room to come up with stuff. And Dungeons and Dragons, I still love is my first love. My first game. You never forget your first love, right? Dungeons and Dragons like has a system for just about everything, and yet there's an entire website, selling additional, the DMs Guild selling thousands of things that fill the fruitful void in D&D. I've got a friend who just his supplement for firearms just went copper on drive through.
Oh,
Like, congratulations, right?
yeah.
And firearms in 5e, like there's tons of firearms in 5e home rules, right? And he published his, and it's selling really well. Like, people, somebody said, "Oh, that sounds good and interesting, and I'm running a campaign that would use that," or I want to run a campaign that would use that, or I just want to learn more about that.
Mm.
So there's always there's even in a heavily systemized game, like 5th edition D&D, you still have spaces like that, and they're deliberate.
Hmm.
It's a deliberate choice from Wizards of the Coast to not stat out lasers.
They
Like,
are.
it. I mean, I haven't read the Spelljammer stuff, so maybe they already have. But
Neither have I.
it's deliberate choice to leave that space, and to leave it open, and it's a deliberate choice on their part to not republish Dark Sun, right? Um,
It could also
because
be a
people,
cost choice. We don't
it,
know their planning exactly.
it's true, but part of that cost choice is, are we missing something? You know, that we can, like, if we're missing something that we can give to people, and they can, now they can play in that side.
Hmm.
And I'll give a really two great examples of this. Eberron, the Eberron setting, um, e- like, comes with rules for base building,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
So
there were not
I,
rules for that.
I am very much loving this line of conversation, but I have to bring it back to the topic we're at.
Sorry. Okay.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I love this. I ever do a design series, I want you back on and we can talk for hours. Because I could listen to this all day and we are already twice the length of every other episode of this.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, it's all
All right.
good. It's all good. It's my fault for not bringing it in. So, last question about paid GMing. Yes, this is a paid GMing interview, not
Right.
design. Design is amazing, though. Um, you have a new group. You have to run in about 3 hours. You know they're experienced in RPGs, but you don't know what. You have 3 hours. What game are you grabbing and running for these people?
Probably grabbing a Powered by the Apocalypse game. And part of that will depend on if I know, do I know anything about their interests?
You know nothing about their interests, only that they have played RPGs before.
They've played RPGs before. Do I know if they've played 5e or other things?
You have no idea. You
No
know, in
idea.
3 hours, they're going to be at your house ready to play.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm grabbing a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I'm probably grabbing uh one of the mystery ones. I'm either grabbing Jinkies or Brindlewood Bay, because they're powered by the apocalypse that tell stories, about, tell mystery stories. They're easy to drop into. Jinkies is basically Scooby Doo. So it's youthful, and everything. And it was written by my best friend. So, like, I I
Fair?
I I helped with the project management, so I really care about the game. And it's a good one for younger people as well. So, like, even if I don't know how old these players are, I know that it's a safe choice, right? Brindlewood Bay is, like, Murder She Wrote meets Golden Girls. It's great. It's fantastic. It's elder. It you're it's
Just kittens. I
Oh,
I
okay.
just have to make sure no one's hurt. Yeah, no, kitten's fine. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
It's okay. Um, so I don't know if you're gonna cut that or not, but
Nope,
so
nope, we don't do editing here.
oh, we just keep going. All right. So Brindlewood Bay, it's elderly female sleuths, solving mysteries, and especially if I've got 3 hours and they're coming right there, like, every mystery is like one page, so I have
Oh,
no problem just dropping in, and those 3 hours, I'm basically getting snacks and printing out the character sheets. That's about all it takes 15 minutes to make characters. It's super quick to get going, and then we're off and running. And I don't in both of these games, because they're powered by the apocalypse, you don't have to, as the GM, know the answer to the mystery. The
Mm-hmm.
players will provide it. The players come up with the players decide who done it. So you don't have to do that part. You just have to, you know, make note, check off which clues they got, describe the clues as they find them, and let them draw their own conclusions. And sometimes their conclusions are wrong, and that's really based on whether the dice say that they were right or wrong, based on how many clues they'd gotten. Or or they're right, and then they catch the bad guy, and the bad guy goes to jail. So they unmask him. It was old men, others, whatever it is. So
Very cool. Um, Before we say goodbye, is there anything projects you're working on, or anything you want to announce or hype up, or upcoming games you want to advertise? Anything?
So I'm on startplaying.games. At my GM name is Mortaine, Mortaine. I periodically run new campaigns, but you can also reach out to me there and get an invite to my Discord server, where we actually have 4 GMs doing paid GMing on that site, on that Discord. So we have games going all the time. Um, on the design side, I'm running a playtest right now. If you'll, I don't know, do you have a space for links in your
Ever
podcast?
anything you're willing to pass on to me, I'll put in links underneath.
Great. I will send you the sign up form for it, because I mentioned it's based on Burn Bright. It's magical girls.
Oh,
Uh,
neat.
yeah, it's neat and weird, and it's I don't know where it's going yet, but it's going somewhere. And I'm recruiting playtesters, so it's kind of it's a fun way to it's a fun way to play with someone who is normally a paid GM, who is getting players for free for a bit while developing that project. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, thinking about it, I think mechanics might actually work better for that setting, other than the spaceship, than Burn Bright. But that's a biased opinion of mine. That you know.
It I think it yes, I think it can work really well for that setting. I think it works really well for the space setting. I've run Burn Bright before, and those mechanics, they're entertaining in that it's fantasy space. It's not like gritty space. So
Yeah, yeah.
we're not looking for Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica.
Oh
We're
God,
we're
no.
we're looking we're looking for pigs in space. Like it's way weirder than those other things. So
uh, yeah, I've read it a few times, and it's been comically entertaining.
yeah, 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 super fun.
All right, Stephanie, is there any last things you want to say, or are we good to say goodbye to the audience?
Um, I just thank you so much for having me on here, and for
Of
letting me
course.
just ramble way too long about game design.
Oh, it's
Um,
one of my favorite topics. If I ever do a design show, I'm inviting you back, and like if I find more, I'm gonna have them reach out to you because, like I said, I would have made this a 2-hour episode if we didn't have a different topic.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. But definitely, appreciate you letting me ramble on, like I said, and thanks for doing these podcasts, and these, this is a great opportunity for people to kind of talk about our passion projects, and these side things. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. All right, then with that, I'm Matthew Pose from Warlock Sanctum Games, and this has been Stephanie, and we will see you all next time when I decide I need to do a design podcast because I have to have Stephanie back. But for now, bye everyone. Hope you're having a great weekend.